No one wanted the disabled alien princess, but a human chose to stand by her. The Velerans were known for their strength, agility, and brilliance. They were tall, luminous beings with sharp, elegant features, and they prided themselves on excellence in every form. Yet amid all this perfection, one life did not quite fit. Princess Lyra was born into the royal family under the glowing twin moons of Velira. From the beginning, she was different. Her body did not move with the same grace as the other children. Her legs struggled to keep pace, and her hands shook slightly when she tried to hold delicate objects. Her voice, when she spoke, came out slow and uneven. In a society that valued strength and perfection above all else, Lyra's differences were seen as weaknesses. The palace was magnificent, filled with halls of crystal that reflected every color of the sky. But for Lyra, it felt more like a cage than a home. Everywhere she turned, eyes followed her, some with pity, some with disdain, and others with outright disgust. Even the tutors who were meant to guide her often sighed at her mistakes, their patience wearing thin with every misstep. Despite all this, Lyra had a mind that sparkled as brightly as the palace crystals. She observed everything, listened carefully, and asked questions that made the adults pause. While other children played games of speed and strength, Lyra studied patterns of the stars, calculated paths for ships, and imagined the possibilities of new worlds beyond her own. Yet no one in the court seemed to notice. Her talent for thought was invisible in a world that celebrated action over reflection. Her parents, King Valen and Queen Seraphine, loved her quietly. They saw beyond her physical challenges and understood her heart. But they too were trapped in the expectations of their people. Advisors whispered in the shadows about how the princess could never rule if she was weak. How would she lead armies? How would she inspire loyalty? The questions haunted the palace halls. The king and queen tried to shield her from the judgment, yet the whispers crept into every corner of her life. Lyra learned to move carefully, to speak softly, and to hide her fear and sadness behind a polite smile. She wandered the palace gardens alone, where the floating flowers glowed in shades of blue and violet, and the air smelled sweet and earthy. These gardens became her sanctuary. Here she could dream of a life beyond judgment, a life where she mattered for who she was, not how fast she could run or how strong she appeared. One morning, as twin suns rose over the horizon, Lyra sat by a small pond that reflected the skies above. She traced the water with her fingers, creating ripples that danced across the surface. Her tutor, Master Thalen, entered quietly, holding a stack of books. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice tight, "I have brought your lessons for the day." Lyra looked up and forced a smile. "Thank you, Master Thalen," she replied softly. Master Thalen sighed, placing the books on a marble table. "You must try harder," he said. "The court expects excellence. You must be perfect if you wish to be accepted." Lyra's heart sank. She had tried every day, but her body simply could not obey as quickly as others. Still, she nodded. "I will do my best," she whispered. Later that day, in the grand hall where the royal court gathered, Lyra watched the nobles discuss matters of state. They spoke of trade, defense, and politics with a confidence she admired but could not match in her own body. When her turn came to speak, she struggled to rise from her chair, her legs trembling. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some hid their amusement behind polite expressions, others stared with clear disappointment. "Princess Lyra," said Lord Kareth, a senior advisor with sharp eyes, "are you well enough to participate today?" His words were polite but laced with doubt. Lyra swallowed, forcing herself to stand tall. "Yes, my lord," she said. Her voice was slow but clear. She explained her observations about a minor trade negotiation, offering ideas that were practical and clever. A few advisors nodded slightly, but most remained unimpressed. After the meeting, Lyra retreated to the library, a vast room filled with ancient texts that smelled of old paper and starlight. Here, she felt safe. Here she could explore worlds beyond Velira, where heroes came in all forms, and strength was measured by heart and mind, not by speed or physical power. She devoured stories of distant planets, of humans who faced impossible odds, and of leaders who triumphed not through brute force, but through courage, compassion, and intelligence. Lyra dreamed of meeting such beings one day. She longed for a friend who would see her not as weak, but as capable, yet in her own world such a friend seemed impossible. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Lyra's isolation deepened. The palace corridors echoed with laughter she could not join, and the crystal towers sparkled with celebrations from which she was always left apart. Even her peers treated her differently. Young princes and princesses avoided her, unsure how to relate to someone so unlike themselves. Their games were too fast, their jokes too sharp, and their movements too perfect for Lyra to join. Still, Lyra did not give up hope. She learned to move slowly and deliberately, to study every detail of her surroundings, and to think strategically. She knew that her strength lay not in her body, but in her mind. While others trained in combat or agility, she trained her intelligence, practicing calculations, observing patterns, and reading about the history of Velira and beyond. One evening, as the twin moons bathed the palace in silver light, Lyra climbed to the highest tower. She leaned against the cool crystal, looking out at the vast horizon. The stars twinkled like scattered jewels, and she imagined ships traveling across the galaxy. Her heart ached with longing. If only someone could see her as she truly was. If only someone could believe in her potential. It was in that moment that she made a quiet promise to herself. "I will show them," she whispered. "I will prove that strength comes in many forms. One day they will see me not as weak, but as capable. One day I will make a difference." The palace was silent, save for the gentle hum of the wind through the crystal towers. Lyra felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. She did not know how it would happen or when, but she believed that somewhere beyond the walls of the palace, there was a world where her heart and mind could shine. And so the outcast princess of Velira began her quiet journey, not with weapons or speed, but with intelligence, courage, and a determination that no one could take away. Little did she know that soon, a visitor from far beyond the stars would arrive, changing her life forever. Someone who would see her not as disabled, but as remarkable. Someone who would become her friend, her ally, and perhaps the first person to truly understand her. For now, Lyra remained alone in the palace, watching the stars and dreaming. But the first steps of her story were already being written, in the quiet strength of her mind and the unyielding hope in her heart. The sky above Velira was painted in shades of orange and pink as the twin suns began their descent. The palace, with its floating crystal towers, shimmered in the warm light. Princess Lyra wandered through the gardens, her fingers brushing the glowing petals of flowers that floated gently in the air. The day had been quiet, perhaps too quiet. She liked quiet. It gave her time to think and dream. Suddenly, a strange hum filled the air, a sound that was not of Velira. It was low, mechanical, and steady, like the heartbeat of a giant metal creature. Lyra froze, her curiosity mixing with caution. She had never heard anything like it before. Slowly, she moved toward the source of the sound, hiding behind a cluster of floating blue flowers. Hovering above the garden was a ship unlike anything Lyra had seen. Its surface was smooth and silver, reflecting the colors of the sky. Lights flickered along its hull, and it moved with an elegance that almost seemed alive. Lyra's eyes widened. She had read about explorers from other worlds in the old texts, but she had never imagined one would arrive here in her own garden. The ship landed softly on the marble pathway, and a ramp extended down. A figure stepped out. He was human. Lyra had seen images of humans in the texts she studied, but seeing one in person was different. He was tall and strong, with brown hair and clear, bright eyes. His uniform was simple but practical, and he carried a small pack at his side. What struck Lyra most was his calm presence. Unlike the nobles of her court, he did not move with judgment or superiority. The human noticed Lyra almost immediately, though he did not look at her with pity or surprise. Instead, he gave a small, polite smile. "Hello," he said. His voice was warm and steady. "I hope I am not intruding. I am Captain Ethan Cole, an explorer from a distant world. I come in peace." Lyra felt a strange flutter in her chest. She was used to people looking at her with judgment, but this human looked at her as if she mattered. Slowly, she stepped forward. I am Princess Lyra," she stammered, her voice quiet but clear. "Welcome to Velira." Ethan's smile widened slightly. "It is an honor to meet you, Princess Lyra. Your world is beautiful." His gaze swept over the floating flowers and crystal towers. "And you seem very observant." Lyra blinked. No one had ever commented on her observation before. People often ignored her, assuming she was weak. She nodded shyly. "I like to watch and learn," she said. For the next hour, Lyra guided Ethan through the garden. She showed him the floating flowers, the ponds that reflected the twin moons, and the hidden alcoves where the wind created soft, melodic sounds. Ethan asked questions about everything, not in a way that demanded answers, but in a way that invited conversation. "You have a very special world," he said, kneeling by a pond to watch the reflection of the moons. "It feels alive in a way I haven't felt anywhere else." Lyra smiled faintly. "It is alive if you know where to look." For the first time, Lyra felt a connection with someone outside the palace walls. Ethan listened to her ideas, her observations, and even her doubts. He did not dismiss her or pity her. He asked questions that made her think deeper, and he seemed genuinely interested in her answers. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, Ethan spoke of his own world. He described humans, people who were not always strong or perfect, yet who achieved great things through courage, intelligence, and determination. He spoke of explorers, scientists, and leaders who faced challenges far beyond their strength but overcame them with creativity and heart. Lyra listened, fascinated. She had always imagined other worlds, but hearing about them from someone who had actually traveled among the stars made them real. She realized that perhaps strength could mean more than speed, agility, or physical skill. Perhaps true strength could come from the mind, from courage, from persistence. "You are very brave, Princess Lyra," Ethan said softly, looking at her with respect. "Not because of what you can do physically, but because you keep learning and observing, even when others doubt you." Lyra's heart lifted at his words. She had spent so long hiding her abilities, believing she was weak. To hear someone say that she was brave, it felt like sunlight after a long storm. Over the next several days, Ethan explored the palace with Lyra as his guide. The court watched the visitor with curiosity and suspicion. Humans were unknown to Velerans, and many whispered that his presence was dangerous. But Ethan's calm demeanor and polite manners soon began to win over a few of the less prejudiced nobles. Lyra and Ethan spent hours in the library, studying star charts and ancient texts. Ethan asked questions that challenged Lyra to think in new ways. He suggested ideas for exploring other worlds, for using technology and strategy to solve problems, and for imagining possibilities beyond what her people had considered. Lyra found herself learning from him as much as he seemed to learn from her. One afternoon, while they were studying a star map, Lyra's frustration showed. She had been working on a theory about a potential trade route that could benefit Valira, but no matter how she explained it, the court would never accept her ideas. "They don't listen," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "They only see me as different, as weak." Ethan looked at her kindly. "Lyra, being different does not mean being weak. Often those who are different can see solutions that others cannot. You just need someone who believes in you." Lyra's eyes widened. For the first time, she felt that belief. Someone from another world, someone who did not care about what others thought, believed in her. It was a small spark, but it was enough to light hope in her heart. As the days passed, Lyra began to share more of her thoughts and ideas with Ethan. She spoke of the palace, the court, and her frustrations with a society that valued perfection above all else. Ethan listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. One evening they walked along the crystal bridge that connected two palace towers. The wind carried the scent of floating flowers, and the twin moons reflected off the glassy surface below. Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I feel trapped," she said. "Everyone expects me to be perfect, but I cannot be perfect, not like them." Ethan stopped and turned to her. "Then be yourself, Lyra. Perfection is an illusion. Strength comes in many forms, and I see strength in you, not in your speed or agility, but in your mind, your heart, and your courage to keep going." Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made her feel that her differences were not a burden, but a gift. She nodded, unable to find words, but the warmth in her chest spoke louder than anything she could say. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Lyra and Ethan grew stronger. The court continued to watch with suspicion, but Lyra no longer felt alone. She had a friend who saw her true value, who challenged her to think bigger, and who inspired her to believe in herself. One afternoon, while examining a map of nearby star systems, Ethan made an observation that sparked excitement in Lyra. "Princess, these routes could connect Valira with other worlds. Trade, exploration, and knowledge could flow freely. You could lead the way." Lyra's eyes sparkled with possibility. "But the court would never allow it," she said, doubt creeping in. "Perhaps not," Ethan replied calmly. "But the right idea, when presented with courage and clarity, can change minds, and you have both." Lyra considered his words. She had always been afraid of failure, of disappointing her people. But with Ethan's encouragement, she felt a new confidence. Perhaps her mind and her heart were more powerful than she had ever realized. That evening, as the twin moons rose high above the crystal towers, Lyra stood at the balcony of her room, looking at the stars. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, filling her with hope. She realized that her journey was just beginning. There was much to learn, much to plan, and much to prove, not for others but for herself. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet excitement grew. The princess who had been outcast, the princess who had been seen as weak, now had a companion who believed in her. Together, they would explore, they would learn, and perhaps they would find a way to show Velyra that strength and courage came in many forms. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that the impossible might be possible. The morning on Velyra was unusually quiet. The twin suns rose slowly over the floating crystal towers, casting long, golden shadows across the palace gardens. Princess Lyra had been awake for hours, her mind restless. Lately, news from neighboring star systems had grown troubling. Traders spoke of a powerful alien empire, the Clyrath, moving through nearby systems, conquering planets with speed and force. The court had heard rumors for years, but now the threat felt immediate. Lyra's fingers traced the edge of her balcony, her thoughts racing. The palace was magnificent, but no beauty could shield her people from a real danger. She wanted to speak to the council, to suggest strategies for defense, but she knew how they would react. "You are not strong enough to advise us," they would say. "Let the generals handle this." Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Princess Lyra." Captain Ethan Cole stepped onto the balcony, his eyes calm but serious. "The Clyrath are real and they are moving fast. We must prepare whether the court understands or not." Lyra turned to him, determination burning in her eyes. "I know," she said, "but they will not listen to me. They see me as different." Ethan shook his head. "Different does not mean powerless. If you have ideas, we can find a way to show them. You are clever, Lyra. You can see solutions others cannot." She took a deep breath. Ethan was right. She had spent so long hiding her abilities, thinking her voice did not matter. But if she remained silent now, countless lives could be at risk. "Then we must act," she said, her voice steady. "We must find a way to defend Velyra before the Clyrath arrive." The two of them began by examining star maps in the library. Lyra's knowledge of Velyra's geography and trade routes gave them insight into potential vulnerabilities. Ethan contributed his understanding of strategy and technology, suggesting ways to strengthen defenses without relying solely on brute force. "Look here," Lyra said, pointing to a system near the edge of Velyra's territory. "This is where supply ships pass. If the Clyrath take control of this route, they could cut off our resources before we even know they are coming." Ethan nodded. "Then we must secure it, but we cannot rely only on our armies. We need alliances." Lyra hesitated. The court had always resisted alliances with other civilizations. They preferred isolation, believing Velyra to be self-sufficient. But Ethan's words reminded her that strength often lay in unity. "Perhaps we could reach out to neighboring worlds," she suggested cautiously. "If they agree to help, we might have a chance." Ethan smiled. "Exactly. You see patterns and possibilities that others ignore. That is your strength." Over the next few days, Lyra and Ethan worked tirelessly. They crafted messages to nearby systems, detailing the threat and requesting support. They also created simulations to predict the Clyrath's movements and possible strategies for defense. The work was exhausting, but Lyra felt alive in a way she never had before. For the first time, her mind mattered more than her body, and she was determined to make it count. Meanwhile, news of the Clyrath's approach spread through the court, causing panic. Nobles argued with one another, some calling for immediate evacuation, others for war. The generals were confident in their armies, but even they admitted that the Clyrath were unlike any enemies they had faced. Their ships were fast, their technology advanced, and their tactics ruthless. Lyra observed all of this from the shadows, her heart pounding. She realized that her people's reliance on traditional strength would not be enough. They needed creativity, intelligence, and quick thinking, qualities the court often dismissed in her. One evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed pink and purple, Lyra found herself on the crystal bridge, staring at the horizon. Ethan joined her, carrying a small device that projected a holographic map of Velyra and the approaching Clyrath fleet. "They are closer than we thought," Ethan said quietly. If they reach the outer systems, it will be only a matter of time before they attack the main cities. Lyra studied the map, her mind racing. We can use the terrain to our advantage, she said. The floating towers, the dense crystal forests, if we position defenses cleverly, we can slow them down. Ethan nodded. Exactly, and if we combine that with diplomacy, we might even prevent a full-scale attack. Some of the Clyrath may be persuaded to negotiate if they see we are prepared and united. Lyra's heart leapt. The idea of using intelligence and strategy instead of relying solely on physical power resonated with her. This was her chance to prove her worth, not just to the court, but to herself and her people. The next morning, she gathered her courage and approached the royal council. The hall was filled with tension. Nobles and generals argued loudly, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. Lyra stepped forward, her hands steady despite her trembling legs. "Your Majesties, honored council members," she began, her voice clear. "I know I am not like the others, I am different. But I have studied the Clyrath and our systems, and I believe I have ideas that could help us defend our planet." A murmur ran through the room. Some looked skeptical, others surprised. Lord Kareth, the senior advisor who had often doubted her, raised an eyebrow. "You, Princess. And what could you possibly suggest that our generals have not already considered?" Lyra took a deep breath. "Strength alone will not defeat the Clyrath. We must think carefully, use intelligence, and act quickly. I have mapped potential routes they may take, and I have ideas for alliances with nearby systems. If we combine our defenses with strategy and diplomacy, we have a chance to protect Velira." The room fell silent. Some nobles whispered to one another, doubting her. But a few eyes widened in surprise. They had never heard Lyra speak with such clarity and insight. Even the generals paused, considering her words. Ethan stepped forward quietly. "Princess Lyra's ideas are sound," he said. "I have traveled across the stars and seen many strategies. Her plan is practical and clever. With her guidance, we can act before the Clyrath strike." The council was hesitant, but the looming threat of the Clyrath left them little choice. Reluctantly, they agreed to follow Lyra's advice, at least in part. She was given a small team of officers and advisors to help implement her strategies, and Ethan was allowed to assist. Over the following days, Lyra worked tirelessly. She coordinated patrols along the outer systems, sent envoys to neighboring planets, and oversaw the positioning of defenses. She faced skepticism at every turn, but she refused to let it stop her. With Ethan's encouragement, she pushed forward, her confidence growing with each small victory. One afternoon, a scout ship reported unusual activity near a distant system. Lyra studied the data carefully. "The Clyrath are testing our defenses," she said. "They are probing our outer systems to see where we are weakest. We must respond quickly." Ethan nodded. "Then we adapt. We cannot let them predict our moves." Lyra coordinated a series of maneuvers that used the terrain, Velira's natural resources, and clever positioning to confuse and slow the enemy scouts. It worked. The Clyrath retreated, at least temporarily, unable to penetrate the defenses she had planned. The court began to take notice. Whispers of her intelligence spread through the palace halls. "Perhaps the princess is not as weak as we thought," some nobles murmured. "She may be our best hope after all." Lyra did not let the praise distract her. She knew the Clyrath's main fleet would arrive soon. Every day brought new challenges, and every decision carried weight. She felt the pressure, but also a growing sense of purpose. For the first time in her life, she was not defined by her differences. She was defined by her abilities, her courage, and her determination to protect her people. As night fell, Lyra and Ethan stood once more on the crystal bridge, watching the stars. "You have done something remarkable, Lyra," Ethan said quietly. "You have shown the court that true strength comes in many forms, and the Clyrath will soon see it too." Lyra looked at the distant horizon, her heart steady. She knew the coming days would be difficult, but she also knew she was ready. With her mind, her courage, and the support of her friend from another world, she would face the threat beyond the stars. The Clyrath were coming. But so was the outcast princess. No longer afraid, no longer hidden, and ready to prove that intelligence, strategy, and heart could be more powerful than any weapon. The battle for Velira was about to begin, and Princess Lyra would lead the charge in a way no one had ever imagined. The first rays of dawn stretched across Velira, illuminating the floating crystal towers in soft gold. The palace was awake with activity. Couriers rushed along glass bridges, Messages flickered across holographic displays, and soldiers prepared for drills. Princess Lyra stood at the command balcony, her gaze sweeping across the city. Today would test everything she had planned, the strategies, the alliances, and the courage she had worked so hard to inspire. Beside her, Captain Ethan Cole adjusted a holographic display of the approaching Clyrath fleet. "They are moving faster than we expected," he said. "But your preparations have given us an advantage. If we act carefully, we can slow them down and protect the outer systems." Lyra nodded, her mind already racing through calculations and possible outcomes. "We cannot rely on brute force. We must use strategy, intelligence, and every advantage Valira offers. If we misstep, the consequences could be catastrophic." The palace gates opened, and emissaries from neighboring star systems arrived. Some were wary, hesitant to trust Valira, but many had seen the reports of Lyra's leadership and the clever defenses she had devised. Slowly, alliances began to form. Representatives from nearby planets spoke with the generals, agreeing to provide support in supplies, reconnaissance, and reinforcements. Lyra felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she was not acting alone. Her vision was becoming reality. Her mind, once ignored, was now the center of a coordinated effort to defend her world. That afternoon, the council convened in the Grand Hall. Nobles, generals, and allied representatives filled the space. Many still looked at Lyra with doubt, but some eyes now held respect. She stood at the front, flanked by Ethan, ready to present the final strategy. "The Clyrath will not attack the main city immediately," she began, her voice steady. "They will test our defenses, probe our outer systems, and seek the weakest points. We must anticipate their moves, set traps, and position our forces strategically. Our strength lies not in fighting them head-on, but in using intelligence and coordination to outmaneuver them." Some generals frowned, unconvinced. "But the Clyrath are strong and ruthless," one said. "We cannot rely on trickery alone." Lyra met his gaze. "We are not relying on trickery. We are using our knowledge, our terrain, and our alliances to maximize our strengths. Every move is calculated. Every decision is backed by intelligence and planning. If we act together, we can protect Valira and save countless lives." A long silence followed. Then, slowly, the murmurs of agreement grew louder. The allies nodded, generals conferred, and even the skeptics began to see the wisdom in her plan. Lyra felt a quiet satisfaction. She was no longer the outcast princess. She was a leader whose mind could guide her people through danger. The next morning, Lyra oversaw the deployment of forces to the outer systems. Ships positioned themselves in strategic locations. Sensors scanned the skies for enemy movement, and patrols kept watch over key routes. Lyra's plan was precise, relying on intelligence rather than raw power. Ethan joined her in one of the control rooms where holographic maps displayed every movement. "You've done something remarkable, Lyra," he said. "The Clyrath won't expect this level of coordination." "They may be powerful, but they are not invincible," Lyra smiled faintly. "We'll see soon enough." That evening, a message arrived from a nearby system. A small Clyrath scouting party had entered their territory. Lyra and Ethan studied the data carefully. The enemy ships were fast, but their paths were predictable. Using the terrain and calculated maneuvers, Lyra devised a plan to trap the scouts and force them to retreat without engaging in a full-scale battle. The operation began at dawn. Veliran ships moved with precision, guided by Lyra's strategy. They lured the Clyrath scouts into a narrow corridor of crystal towers and floating islands. The enemy fleet tried to break formation, but the Velirans anticipated every move. Traps delayed the scouts, while allied forces cut off their retreat. From the command balcony, Lyra watched as the plan unfolded. Her pulse quickened with excitement. This was the moment she had prepared for, proof that intelligence and strategy could outmatch raw power. Slowly, the Clyrath scouts realized they could not advance and withdrew, confused and frustrated. The council erupted in cautious applause. Some nobles whispered in awe. "Perhaps the princess is not so weak after all," they said. Even the generals nodded, impressed by the success of the operation. Lyra allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew this was only the beginning. The main Clyrath fleet would arrive soon, far larger and more dangerous than the scouts. Every decision would matter, every strategy would be tested, and the fate of Valira hung in the balance. Over the next several days, Lyra worked tirelessly. She adjusted plans, coordinated with allies, and prepared the city for possible evacuation routes if needed. Her determination inspired those around her. Soldiers who had doubted her now followed her orders without hesitation. Civilians found hope in her leadership. Even some nobles who had once scorned her began to acknowledge her skill. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Lyra walked through the palace gardens with Ethan. The floating flowers glowed softly in the moonlight, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sweet petals. Lyra allowed herself a moment of reflection. "I never imagined it would be like this," she said quietly. "That I could lead, that people would listen, that my ideas could make a difference." Ethan smiled. "You've always had it in you, Lyra. You just needed the chance to show the world. And now you are." Lyra nodded. "I only hope it's enough." The next day, the Clyrath made their move. The sky darkened with the shadow of their massive fleet, their ships sleek and menacing. The palace bells rang, warning every city and system to prepare for battle. Lyra's heart pounded, but she remained calm. Panic would not help anyone. From the command center, she directed the deployment of forces. Ships moved in coordinated patterns, sensors tracked enemy movements, and strategic traps delayed the advancing fleet. Lyra's mind raced through possibilities, predicting their moves and adjusting plans in real time. Ethan monitored communications with allied systems, coordinating reinforcements. "They are strong," he said, "but your strategy is working. They are being forced to split their forces." Lyra focused on a holographic display, guiding a fleet into a narrow passage between floating crystal towers. "This will slow them down," she said. "We can protect the main systems while we assess their next move." The Clyrath attempted to push forward, but the traps and defenses proved effective. Ships collided, forced to retreat, and some were captured. Lyra's strategy had worked. Intelligence had overcome raw power. As the battle continued, Lyra realized the importance of morale. She moved through communication channels, sending messages of encouragement to every commander and soldier. "Stay calm, follow your training, and trust each other," she said. "We are stronger together. Velyra will not fall." Her words spread quickly, reaching even the allied forces. Confidence grew, and the fleet fought with renewed determination. Lyra watched, pride swelling in her chest, as her plan unfolded flawlessly. By nightfall, the Clyrath had been forced to retreat from the outer systems. The battle was not over, but the first victory belonged to Velyra, guided by the mind and courage of its princess. In the aftermath, the council gathered once more. Nobles who had doubted Lyra now looked at her with respect. "Your strategy saved countless lives," one said. "Perhaps we underestimated you," Lyra nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. "This is only the beginning," she replied. "The Clyrath will return. We must continue to prepare, continue to think, and continue to stand together. Strength is not only in our ships and weapons, but in our minds and hearts." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "And you, Lyra, have shown us the power of courage, intelligence, and determination. The Clyrath may be strong, but they have never faced someone like you before." Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. For the first time, she truly believed in herself. She had risen against the odds, using her mind and her heart to lead. And she knew that, with Ethan by her side and her people behind her, they could face anything that came next. As the twin moons reflected off the crystal towers, Lyra stood on the balcony, looking at the stars. The future was uncertain, the challenges were immense, but she felt ready. The outcast princess of Velyra had become a leader, a strategist, a thinker, and a symbol of hope. And the Clyrath, powerful as they were, would soon learn that Velyra was not a world to be conquered easily. The real battle had only just begun, and Princess Lyra was ready to rise to every challenge. The twin suns rose over Velyra with a fiery brilliance, casting long shadows over the crystal towers and the floating gardens. The city was alive with anticipation and tension. The Clyrath fleet, larger and more powerful than any that had approached before, had been sighted at the edge of Velyra's outer system. The final battle was approaching, and everyone, from the generals to the civilians, knew that the planet's fate rested on careful planning, courage, and unity. Princess Lyra stood on the command balcony, her mind alive with calculations and strategy. Captain Ethan Cole stood beside her, calm and supportive as ever. "They're close," he said, pointing to the holographic display that tracked the massive enemy fleet. "But our defenses are strong, and your plan has given us an advantage." Lyra nodded, her heart steady. "Strength alone will not win this battle. We will rely on strategy, coordination, and the trust of our people. Today, Velira fights as one. Below, the city buzzed with activity. Ships of all sizes prepared for deployment. Soldiers checked weapons and systems, and allies from neighboring systems moved into position. Every command, every movement was coordinated according to Lyra's strategy. Her mind, once ignored and underestimated, was now the guiding force of an entire planet's defense. As the Clyrath fleet entered Velira's territory, the battle began. The enemy ships moved swiftly, aiming to overwhelm the defenses with their numbers and advanced technology. But Lyra had anticipated their tactics. Forces moved in precise formations, using the natural terrain of floating islands and crystal towers to slow the invaders. Traps and diversions forced the enemy to split their fleet, while Allied reinforcements struck at vulnerable points. From the command center, Lyra monitored every movement. "Divert the eastern fleet toward the canyon cluster," she instructed. "They cannot maneuver quickly there. Cut off their retreat and hold the line." Ethan adjusted communications, coordinating with Allied ships. "They're responding to the diversion," he said. "Your plan is working, Lyra." The battle raged for hours. Lasers and energy shields lit up the skies, ships maneuvered with incredible speed, and Velira's defenses held firm. Soldiers and civilians alike followed Lyra's guidance, inspired by her calm leadership and intelligent strategies. Even nobles who had doubted her abilities now watched with respect and awe. In the midst of the chaos, Lyra noticed a section of the Clyrath fleet breaking through a weak point in the northern defenses. Without hesitation, she devised a new plan. "Captain Ethan, we need to lead them into the outer crystal forest," she said. "It will slow them down and give our reinforcements time to arrive." Ethan nodded. "I'll coordinate the ships. Let's do this." Lyra directed the movement of the defending fleet, guiding the enemy into the trap she had envisioned. The dense crystal forest proved deadly for the Clyrath ships. They collided with floating towers, became entangled in energy nets, and were forced to retreat. The tide of the battle began to turn. Throughout the day, Lyra's strategy proved to be the key to survival. While the Clyrath were strong and relentless, they had not anticipated a mind capable of predicting their movements and using the environment to its advantage. Lyra's courage, combined with her intelligence, allowed Velira to gain the upper hand. As night fell, the Clyrath fleet, battered and confused, began to withdraw. The Veliran defenses remained intact, and the Allied forces cheered. Victory, against overwhelming odds, belonged to Velira. In the aftermath, the palace was filled with relief and celebration. Civilians poured into the streets, thanking soldiers and leaders alike. The council convened once more, this time in a different tone. Nobles who had once doubted Lyra's abilities approached her with respect. "Princess Lyra," said Lord Kareth, his voice unusually warm, "you have saved our world. Your intelligence, courage, and leadership have proved more powerful than we ever imagined. Velira owes its survival to you." Lyra felt a mix of pride and humility. She had fought not with physical strength, but with the strength of her mind and the courage of her heart. "I could not have done it alone," she replied. "Captain Ethan Cole and our allies from neighboring systems were instrumental. And the people of Velira, soldiers, civilians, everyone stood together. That is what truly saved our world." Ethan stepped forward, giving her a supportive nod. "You led with your mind and heart, Lyra," he said. "You inspired everyone to rise to their best. That is the mark of a true leader." The council declared Lyra a hero, and her story spread quickly across Velira. Citizens, young and old, looked up to her as a symbol of courage, intelligence, and perseverance. The outcast princess, once dismissed for her disability, had become the greatest leader Velira had ever seen. In the following days, Lyra worked with the council to rebuild and strengthen Velira's defenses, ensuring that the planet would remain safe from future threats. She also focused on fostering alliances with neighboring systems, creating a network of support and cooperation that would make Velira stronger than ever. Despite her new status, Lyra remained humble. She continued to explore, to study, and to dream. She walked through the floating gardens, reflecting on her journey. From a young princess who had been ignored and underestimated, she had become a leader whose mind and heart had saved her people. One evening, as the twin moons rose high above the crystal towers, Lyra and Ethan stood together on the balcony. The city below was calm and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of battle. "You did it, Lyra," Ethan said quietly. You led your people through impossible odds. You proved that strength is not only in the body, but in the mind, in courage, and in determination. Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. We did it together, Ethan, and I have learned that being different does not mean being weak. Our differences can be our greatest strength. Ethan nodded, and the people of Vellyra now see it too. They will remember this day forever. Lyra looked out at the stars, her heart full of hope. She knew that challenges would come again, that the galaxy was vast and unpredictable. But she also knew that she was ready. With her mind, her heart, and her allies, there was no challenge she could not face. In the days that followed, the people of Vellyra celebrated their victory. Parades filled the streets, songs were sung in honor of the defenders, and Lyra was recognized not only as a princess, but as a hero and leader. Children looked up to her, inspired to believe in their own abilities, no matter what others might say. Lyra continued to guide her people with wisdom and compassion. She strengthened the alliances she had built, encouraged innovation and creativity, and ensured that the voices of all citizens, regardless of ability or status, were heard. Vellyra entered a new era of cooperation and growth, stronger than ever before. Through it all, Ethan remained by her side, a constant friend, advisor, and companion. Together, they explored the possibilities of the stars, dreaming of new adventures and discoveries, knowing that no matter what the universe held, they could face it together. Lyra's journey had begun in solitude and doubt, but it had led her to greatness. The princess who had been outcast for her disability had risen above prejudice and expectation. She had shown her people that true strength lay in intelligence, courage, and heart. And as she stood on the balcony, watching the twin moons reflect off the crystal towers, Lyra knew that the story of the outcast princess had become a story of triumph, not just for her, but for all of Vellyra. The galaxy was vast, challenges awaited, and adventures called. But Princess Lyra was ready, a beacon of hope, a leader of wisdom, and a hero whose heart and mind would guide her people through anything the stars might bring. Vellyra had survived the Clyrath, but more importantly, it had grown stronger, united, and inspired by a princess who refused to be defined by her differences. The outcast had become a legend. And the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter for her, as if the universe recognized the courage and brilliance of Princess Lyra of Vellyra.